So I wanted to talk a little bit about concrete testing. I went and thought about it, and I've probably done 75 to 100 concrete tests. First thing you do is check the temperature. So this screen on the left, the photo on the left, that's your thermometer. And then you've got the standard air test. Yeah, that's out of order. Okay, that didn't work. Okay, next is the slump test. So I've got a YouTube that you can watch if you want to, and let me just swing this right over into, there we go, enter. So I put that over in the chat. There's a completely different test for super plasticized concrete. Basically, it's a pretty inexpensive test. You need a reasonably clean sheet of plywood. You need a standard cone, which is 12 inches tall, and you need a rod. And some people say, oh, you can use rebar. This guy actually shows the right way to do the tests. There are some other YouTube videos done by people whose names I will not mention, who don't say the right thing about doing the test. If you're going to do the test, you might as well learn how to do it right, as opposed to guessing. So this is the answer. Super plasticized concrete, you go and dump a token, whatever the amount of concrete is, onto that, onto a flat plate, and you see how far it spreads out, and you measure the diameter of the puddle you get. Really cool, never had to do it. Come on, machine, there we go. Okay, so somebody was asking, how come the Roman concrete lasted so long? It didn't have rebar in it. Water loves to find rebar, and then bad things happen. But the rebar takes tension. The concrete, it can take this much tension, and then it dies. And so we have the concrete to form a matrix that holds the rebar, and the rebar acts as the tension strength. You're not going to have a concrete beam without rebar. You're not going to have a slab that you dump a whole lot of loads on without rebar. You're not going to have a slab that you drive a heavy truck over that doesn't have rebar. It also takes the temperature expansion and contraction. Every material expands and contracts with temperature. Most of them contract as it gets colder, and most materials, not including water, of course gets bigger as it gets colder. It also takes shear loads, which is why engineers have so much fun detailing where the rebar goes. We use deformed bars because they hang on to the concrete better. They used to do square bars in like 1900. Round about 1920, they started twisting the square bars and found that gripped even better. Round about 1930, 1940, they started coming out with the deformed bars that you and I would recognize on a job site. I like them tied every other intersection as a minimum. The rod busters at Chinbro were all taught by Harold Dooley. And Dooley taught 2 crews of rod busters how to tie rod using a reel and nips very fast. And it was the carpenters that were using the wires with the little loops and the yo-yo. And the reel and nips guys looked at the yo-yo guys and just, dismissive sniff. They've now got a rebar tie gun, kabang, kabang, kabang. And it just means that you're going to get less carpal tunnel. Your rod installation crew will be more alive at the end of the day. Concrete also needs standees and concrete blocks to hold the rebar in the right place. And a standee, I went and was given some standees that were number 3 bar for the job site that's behind me right over here. It was a 3-foot deep slab, and they had number 3 standees. They're only 3/8 of an inch thick. And so I doubled them up and used them in 1/3 of the area and told my rebar supplier that the next ones needed to be number 4s and I wanted a bunch more. I was a big client at the time. They were very friendly when I asked them for a little better support. Welded wire mesh, you only want to use flat sheets. It comes in rolls, but the rolls tend to not lie flat, so part of it will stick out of the concrete and part of it will be down on the soil. And if it decides to not stay where you've put it, it could rebound, bounce back, and people have lost their eyes. So I always specify flat sheets. It's just smart. And those want to be tied. You lap it over one cell and you tie every other cell. Fiber mesh is temperature steel only. It makes kind of a furry look to a slab. The fuzz will wear off and then you won't see it at all. It's good for some things, it's not good for others. And there are different kinds of fiber mesh. There are crinkly fiber meshes, there are smooth ones, but I only use it for temperature steel. Rebar, a number 4 is 4/8 of an inch in diameter, so that's a 1/2 inch. A number 8 is 8/8, so that's an inch. So good design, you want to have number 4s with number 6s on a job site, or, you know, on this one, number 9s with number 11s, so that people can easily see the size difference and they don't make little mistakes. They still made mistakes like putting the big mat on the bottom instead of the top, but we got that fixed on the QT. And then I just thought, you know, Travis is doing all this other stuff. I'll just do problems I've seen. So, really big block of concrete, that 400 cubic yard block of concrete was the inertial mass for a roll grinder. It takes a paper machine roll and makes it perfect. And this was the inertia to hold that roll grinder so that it didn't shake itself to death. If it's too hot, you actually add ice in controlled amounts. You plan this out with the dispatcher well in advance. I have seen this used on really hot days. Ice is not my preferred method, but then again, I'm from Maine. Yeah, if there's not enough people to install the concrete, call it off, send the trucks home. I have one job site where the contractor did not have enough people and Helen picked up a trowel. I'm not the worst finisher I've ever seen, and we got it done, but that contractor is never going to work on any job of mine ever again. Creep. Yeah. Using a pump truck, plan on a 1 inch less slump at the nozzle. So you go up, you climb up on the truck and you look up in the top, up ahead of the chute. You can see the concrete as it's slumping over the veins inside that mixing tank. And I used to be able to look at it and say, that is a 3-inch slump runner. But if you run a 3-inch slump into a pump truck, it's going to come out 2 inches of slump on whatever distance far away that you're running it. And that's going to be consistent throughout the day. It's not just how much you're wetting the insides of the pump truck and the pump pipe. Okay, so the vibrator dies. Pull out the backup vibrator, which means that you should have a backup vibrator. Rotting or using a shovel, it just doesn't do as well as a vibrator does. And you can get a mix that's made so that you don't have to vibrate it. But those are expensive and they will cure at a different tempo than the concrete that you're used to. I had this once. The concrete mix is the wrong color. I asked the driver, I says, the cement added to this? Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. I says, run a little out in the chute and you look at it. It was the wrong color. It was brown. Don't put that in the forms. It didn't have concrete in it. I was so right. And I was just out of college and I was a sweet young thing. And I'm like, So then they believed me. That was nice. Form blowouts. Oh, every concrete placement, and engineers don't call it concrete pours or cement pours. We call it concrete placements. You place the concrete. Right. Form blowouts. Avoid it. Brace it. Properly connect the forms. Use all the form ties. Have somebody check it. Ben is smirking. Ben, has this happened to you? Oh, good. All right. The job site behind me, this one, was a reinforced concrete set of tanks for a wastewater treatment plant. We were placing a 2.5 foot thick wall, about 25 foot tall, about 30 foot wide, with a pump truck. The valve died. So Chinbro went and called up somebody at their job site in Boston, while somebody else called the valve replacement store. And the Boston people drove over to the valve replacement store, picked up the valve, and drove it all the way up to Winslow, which is a couple hours into the state of Maine. Meanwhile, we're going with vibrators, wheelbarrows, buckets, just trying to prevent a cold joint in the middle of this wall. Managed it. Oh my God, it was amazing. The inspector had a bad evening the night before. Guy I worked with in Oklahoma City, we were building the intersection of I-35 and I-40. Had 4 sets of bridges, 7 bridges total. And one day Phil went out the night before and he had a little too much to drink. And he came in, looked at me and said, I'm sending that first truck back. I'm like, Phil, you can't do that. I mean, you have to look at it first. It has to actually have something wrong with it. Phil looks at me and he's like, nope, that first truck's going home. The first truck came, it was beautiful. It was lovely. Phil looks at me, climbs up into the cab of the truck. And the cab of the truck has a little counter that counts how many times the cylinder has rolled around on the mixer. And it should only say, 55 to 75. But, that's the distance that it goes from the plant to where you're going to drop it off. Most of the truck drivers ignore that. It said 55,000. And Phil sent it home. Oh my God. He just had a bad night the night before. Other things that I've seen, carpenters. You've got to watch carpenters every minute. They toss their pizza boxes in there. And, when I was 22, I climbed into the forms and took them out. Now I make them remove them themselves. Lazy beasts. Okay, a bag of sugar in the truck, you confiscate it. Sugar extends how long the concrete will stay flexible. So if you've got your concrete and it's a little bit old, you put a little sugar in it. What it does to the strength characteristics, oh man, it creams it. Keep your sugar for your cookies. Retempering the concrete, if you've already placed 2 yards and it's been an hour, you might think you want to go and put in 6 more gallons of water into the mix. Don't retemper the mix. Get your concrete out of the truck. It's a good way to get a bad strength result because what it does is it makes a mess of your water cement ratio. Lenton couplers figured into the job behind me. They needed to drive a crane over a spot where there were a whole bunch of standing rebar that were number 9s and number 11s. That's 1 1/8 and 1 3/8. So I said, and you know, I was 22, you know, this young thing, and it's like, oh my God, there's a girl engineer on the job site and everybody's getting all excited about it. So I walk into the trailer and Newton is sitting there with his feet on the table, and all of the other supervisors sitting there, and they're trying to figure out what they're going to do. Mrs. Watts wasn't Mrs. Watts then. I said, what about Lenton couplers? I made an order that day for $45,000 worth of Lenton couplers. God, it was fun. Super hard floors are made much like super flat floors, and basically they beat the heck out of the paste and they run over them a bunch of times, and then they go and they cast some aggregate on the surface and beat that in. Kind of cool. Super hard and super flat floors are used in like big warehouse stores. You might find them in Home Depots, something like that. Putting the big mat of rebar on the wrong side of the concrete, the heavy mat of rebar goes on the tension side of the concrete. You've got 2 tension sides of the concrete, you got rebar on both sides. Welded wire mesh not ending up in the middle of the slab. It's really difficult to get it in the middle of the slab. And don't be thinking that you can put down all your concrete and then stomp it in. It won't go. Yeah, difficult. All right, it's concrete's job to shrink while it's curing. If you have big areas of concrete, either vertical or horizontal, you're going to need a joint. For slabs, the joint is 1/4 of the slab thickness. A 4-inch slab should have joints at 12 feet and no more than 15 feet apart. You can saw cut it within 8 hours, or you can go do something with a zip strip. I like the zip strip myself, but old concrete's problems, number 1 problem is cracking. The other number 1 problem is water getting to the rebar. All of the other problems comparatively are little problems. So when Trevor was talking about density and porosity, this is what's going on. Yeah.
Hey, Helen, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we're running out of time, and I want to make sure that Chris gets a shot to get his slides up and we can get some questions in. So,
all right,
if you want to just take another minute, if you want to hit some high points in the last couple slides.
This is I went looking for concrete stuff for this presentation. This is the recipe for chocolate concrete. It's made in the schools in the UK, and it's everybody's favorite dessert. There you go. Good. I'm all set.